Welcome. Grover Norquist here, President of Americans for Tax Reform. And this is the Leave Us Alone podcast for people who want the government to leave us alone. We're going to start by discussing some bad news, some bad hombres, some people who have disappointed. This is Caesar and Brutus territory. This is Benedict Arnold, Jane Fonda territory. 17 Republicans voted with every single Democrat to save Obamacare or to save to make Obamacare not reveal its failures, to cover up the failure of Obamacare. And they did so with other people's money. Why did this happen? Can it be stopped in the Senate? Can it be stopped next time in the vote in the House? Will the president have to veto it? We're going to be talking about this betrayal of the 17 and what it means and how it happened. With us, we have Mike and Isabelle. Mike, can you start us down the road of how we ended up getting here?
Yeah, so we should start off talking about exactly how we got to this point. And that is we had a handful of Republicans, about 3 or 4, who initially signed a Democrat discharge petition on this vote. We've had these COVID-era boosted Obamacare subsidies that are on top of the previous Obamacare subsidies. So we're just talking about the expanded subsidies here. The CBO had a score on this, about $80 billion over the next 3 years, or roughly $30 billion a year is the cost of doing this. Like all other COVID policy, there's no longer any need for this if there ever was. I don't think Republicans can point to any other COVID-era subsidy that they want to continue. But on healthcare here, as you said, Grover, to disguise the rising costs of Obamacare that's happening because of the failures of Obamacare, it's pretty simple. I think a great point is, why do we call it the Affordable Care Act if we need to keep subsidizing it? It has not made healthcare affordable. But we had these 3 or 4 Republicans join with Democrats to sign a discharge petition, forcing a vote, basically turning over the Republican floor to Democrat leadership for this vote, of which they put forward a 3-year extension of these subsidies with no reforms. Isabelle can break down the policy of that a little bit further, but we had lost 17 Republicans on this vote. It is, I think, a stab in the back to their voters right here. We have Republicans for the last for the last 15 years, decade and a half, have talked about repealing Obamacare. This is the first time we have Republicans voting to actually expand Obamacare. No one campaigned on this. This is a lie to their voters. These 17 Republicans who did this, I think it's a massive betrayal.
Just to be fair, about 200 Republicans voted heck no. 17 voted with the Democrats. So the Republicans didn't double-cross us. 17 Republicans double-crossed us, which is too many. And it only takes one Benedict Arnold in certain circumstances to do great damage.
Yeah, and I do think it's worth noting
Isabelle,
just what these members betrayed their voters for, because it's not nearly the problem that they make it out to be, because they will be hiding behind obscure anecdotes of constituents who would be hurt. But according to insurers themselves, only 4% of the 20% average premium increase this year is going to be attributable to these subsidies ending. And in the country, 21.8 million people actually receive these enhanced premium tax credits, which is 6% of the population. And most of that 6% will continue receiving the premium tax credits that were passed under Obamacare, because under Obamacare, they were available to those who are making under 400% of the federal poverty line. And for context, that is about $63,000 a year for individuals, and for a family of 4, $129,000 per year, or $10,000 a month.
Helping poor people is now shoveling money to people
and that
who
was
make
the original law,
$120,000
so it was already extremely generous to begin with. So when politicians are open to further bankrupting this country and trying to justify it by the tune of over $100 billion, just remember that they're literally catering to people who have many other healthcare options and who make $50,000 over the median salary in the United States.
So, Mike, what happens next? This bill passed the House. Now what?
And Grover, first, I think you made an excellent point, too. We should harp on that. The Republicans didn't do this. It's a handful, 17, who deserve blame, who should be held accountable, who did this. This was done around the back of Republican leadership against the wishes of President Trump, who opposed this. This is something that House leadership has actually been very good on, holding line. As far as they're concerned, this vote is the end of it, that they don't want to see any further action. But unfortunately, what the 17 Republicans did is they gave massive political leverage to Democrats. We've had negotiations going on with Susan Collins and Bernie Moreno, Republican senators in the Senate, who seem to be seeking out some compromise. I would urge them to drop. These credits should just expire, full stop. But what the 17 Republicans just did is they gave the Senate the vehicle to now cut a deal while massively undercutting Republicans negotiating in the Senate, Republican leadership, and the White House on this. If you're Democrats right now, if you're Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, why compromise? The House was just able, you just forced a Republican House to pass a clean 3-year extension.
If the Republicans in the House, the 17 or the 4 that drove the 17, had said, we have to, and it was just all discussed at times, we have to do something about the fraud. We have to make sure that the situation in Minnesota doesn't continue in Minnesota or anywhere else. This is the one that the Somali community was largely involved in. But they're probably not the only people in the United States who figured out how to cheat the federal government. So I'm looking to see many more cities that are doing something similar here. The Democrats and the 17 bad Republicans didn't say, of course, we want to make sure that non-citizens don't get this money. Of course, we want to not have it stolen.
Yeah, and
they weren't willing.
Sorry, but there was $9 billion of fraud exposed in Minnesota from this primarily Somalian community. And the GAO exposed just how much fraud was in specifically these enhanced Obamacare subsidies, which the improper payments of which total $27 billion. So that is 3 times more than what we discovered in Minnesota. And yet these politicians who were so keen to jump on the opportunity to talk about the fraud there and talk about how unethical it was and how we need to crack down on it, so willingly voted for 3 times the amount of fraud. The GAO exposed 58,000 dead people in the Obamacare exchanges, many of which were enrolled after they had already died. And the GAO submitted fake personas to the Obamacare exchanges for these subsidized tax credits, and every single one of these fake personas with presumably no documentation of their existence were approved. So God knows how many illegals and bad actors were approved under the system. I think 27 billion is just scratching the surface, and yet these Republican members still voted to approve all of that.
And to build on Isabelle's point, half of these Republicans who cast this vote, who voted with Democrats here, they were making these very points just last week. It's frustrating. I think, Grover, your comparison on Twitter of this to the Somali fraud, that's the exact point. It is easy to run to the cameras and talk about the Somali fraud when you don't have to vote. When Republicans actually have to cast a vote here, they vote to knowingly continue what themselves were just talking about the week before, 3 times the fraud on Obamacare. And the political cowardice of it. If you can't make Democrats own the failures of Obamacare, it's named after the former Democrat president, if you can't make them own that, then you need it to be in a new line of work.
Yeah. Obamacare is not working because remember, we were promised you could keep your doctor. We were promised it would reduce premiums by
$2,500. Yeah, Obamacare promised, or Obama promised that Obamacare would reduce premiums by $2,500 a month for families.
Did it go down?
No, it doubled or tripled, depending on who you are.
Grover, you've talked about this before too, but the political malpractice of it here too, I don't know why they've let the establishment press beat them into this corner, the idea that if Republicans are talking about health care, they're by definition losing. we've built entire political movements off of going against Obamacare. I don't know where this fear for Republicans is coming. And the end of the day, it's as simple as you were elected to come into office and to repeal Obamacare. Not a single Republican in Congress came in saying they were going to vote to expand it. And here they are backing an $80 billion expansion that really is keeping us on the path towards single payer. I think, Isabelle, you've said this before, the real number of this is made permanent, which good luck ever getting this repealed if it is extended. This is really closer to $500 billion.
And if the Republicans lose the House in this coming
They're
November,
never going to, If
they never
if
get to
this
fix
gets
this.
passed in some form this year, it will never go away.
And again, we have full control of government with Republicans and President Trump in office. This would essentially probably be, next to the tax bill, the second biggest piece of legislation passing this Congress. It's just unthinkable that we elected a Republican trifecta to walk in and expand Obamacare. No one voted for that.
Well, this is also an argument for voting for candidates who have principles, as opposed to some candidates who love to scream on camera and sound loud, and people think that means they're conservatives. Because when the lady from Georgia, Grace...
And Marjorie Taylor Greene.
The former Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's left office now?
Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was out screaming about space lasers, and because the press criticized her, a lot of people who sort of just chuck on the TV go, she's being attacked by CBS. She must be a solid conservative. Well, maybe, but also maybe she's just a little goofy. And we rally around someone who's attacked by the media, and instead of saying, why were they attacked? What did they do? Space lasers? That's not a conservative principle. Until Elon Musk starts making them, then space lasers will be conservative. Yes, but our space lasers, but not the ones from up in this from secret planets or something. Literally, we get people who win elections. Some of the loudest voices in the Republican Party who sound conservative because they're always screaming, and the liberals don't like them. So you listen to the second half of that conversation. The liberals don't like. Oh, they must have said something Reagan-esque, conservative. No, maybe they said something crazy and they got yelled at. You only heard, the teacher doesn't see the guy who hits the other person. He sees the one who hits back. And so you watch TV and you see the press hit back at somebody and you didn't notice what crazy thing they did to get hit back, or whether it was a virtuous, brave thing they did to get back. And you assume it's the liberal media being mean to a conservative, and you sign up and decide, oh, that person's conservative, when it may not be that at all. And
being a contrarian doesn't
always
make you conservative.
Almost every Republican's. Yes. Well, especially if you're like contrarian.
No, but that makes you the most conservative. It makes
that's
the
what
90%
makes you contrarian. There are people who sell that story, but then at the end of the day, they're never the ones who lead the next fight. They throw rocks at other people who are out doing good deeds. But there are a couple of people most Republicans have signed the pledge never to raise taxes. I'm always surprised at the kind of people who don't sign the pledge. They're often just those people. They think they're conservative because they scream or swear when they use Twitter and show how deeply they care. But that's not the same as what do you care about. And by the way, do you competently care about something, as in want to fix it, or you just want to scream about it? Because whining is not work. I want everyone to write that down. Whining is not work. And that goes for congressmen too. And voting against everybody else does not show you want perfect. It shows you handed over the vote. You handed over the floor of the House to the House of Representatives. Mike, what is the danger? Now it goes to the Senate. Can the Senate now pass this very bill?
Leader Thune has said essentially that this is going to come over. As far as they're concerned, it doesn't change what they're planning on the Senate side. But as we were talking about earlier, you do have this attempt from Susan Collins and Bernie Moreno to negotiate with Democrats on this right now. So I think what you've effectively done is you've handed Democrats a lot of political leverage here. But if there is going to be a negotiation, you're coming from a position of the House, which should be controlled by Republicans, but on this vote was handed to Democrats. You now have, they've already passed, including 3-year extension. So hopefully this goes to the Senate, dies, and nothing happens. That's the best possible outcome. We do have some good news just over this weekend, Isabelle, if you want to talk about a little bit. A new statement from President Trump. He posted on Truth Social where he highlighted some
Yeah,
of the
he
really good
highlighted
arguments coming from
a
our friends at
quote
Cato.
from Michael Cannon, and I'm getting the name correct. Okay. He highlighted a quote from
I believe
Michael
that's right.
Cannon talking about the dangers of reinstating the enhanced Obamacare subsidies, and how it's significantly better to use the free market to incentivize insurance companies to lower their rates for people, and using some policies from the first Trump administration to continue lowering those premiums under Trump. So there's a lot of hope there. So I'm generally optimistic. I think it will be hard to find legislation reinstating these subsidies that both the House and Senate will agree on and that Trump would be okay with. So I think we have a lot to be hopeful for, thankfully. It started off as a very bad
that could be progress, and
segment, but
it's interesting to see.
Ultimately, maybe cheerful.
And interesting that Cato, which often was sort of second fiddle to Heritage, is taking a lead in and getting recognized by that by Trump. That's very interesting. Cato's always done very, very good free market work, low tax, limited government, all that good stuff.
And
very,
I think
very
that
helpful.
also shows
Yeah.
the kind of depth within the movement here of opposition to this, where there was a great story Politico had over the weekend covering American for Prosperity's backlash to this vote, where they've essentially said they're going to drop all political support for these 17 Republicans who voted for this. I think it's good to see that type of widespread backlash. Obviously, they're hearing it from us as well. But to have, I think, a united conservative movement, we've seen all of the pro-life groups against this because of the lack of Hyde Amendment, essentially the taxpayer-funded abortion, to discontinue these Democrat subsidies. I think this is something that connects really all the dots for the movement. And I worry that specifically these 17 Republicans, but if a larger compromise is that it is cut with Democrats, that Republicans be underestimating the backlash from conservatives. We've certainly felt it from our grassroots, from all the talk radio interviews we're doing. I think the opposition is out there. It's real. And the Republicans have made the mistake of underestimating backlash from their own side before. You would think they wouldn't be, but hopefully that's the way.
Sorry, I do want to hone one point.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Which is that at the end of the day, this program increases the cost of healthcare, not just for the 6% of people who receive the subsidies, but for everyone. And when insurance companies know that the government will foot the bill, they will raise their prices every time. And they don't want to lose this crazy cash flow that's coming to them, which is they're out in droves lobbying for the reinstatement of these subsidies.
And that may explain why some of these Republicans feel beat up at home, not because the public's there, but because they see dishonest ads run by the insurance company supporters. So some sympathy for people who are being beaten into doing the wrong thing. But we would love to see them toughen up. But cheerful news. What happens this year because of what happened last year, taking taxes down, making tax cuts permanent? Mike, the big, beautiful bill, what good news does it bring us in the next 12 months?
Yeah,
Or
well, it seems
between now and November, when they have an election and people should be paying attention?
We just continue to get a drumbeat of good news here. I think the two things coming up recently, one is we're in January now, we start to head into tax season. We've seen the numbers coming out on expected tax returns, and they're supposed to be about $1,000 higher on average than the previous tax year, roughly about $3,800 per household now, the average tax refund. And as we keep putting out for a good reason this time around. We've always had explained before how giving the government an interest-free loan when you get your tax return isn't necessarily a good thing. And that's probably Democrats' main attack on the 2017 tax cuts, was they went around saying, oh, your tax return is going to be lower this time because of the Republican tax cuts. We had to explain why that was a good thing. But this time around, people are getting larger tax returns because we made this pro-growth policy kick in immediately in the middle of 2025 as soon as the bill was passed. So things like pro-growth expensing, all of the individual tax cuts, the addressing brackets for inflation, all things leading to higher tax returns from pro-growth policy and letting you keep more of your own money than previously. And I think that's where we'll start to see taxpayers, for the first time, really start to see directly the impact of the tax bill.
Because it's one big, beautiful bill, it made it kind of sound like they did one thing, but it did many, many, many things, including Trump accounts. Could you walk through in one rant all of the tax cuts that are there and that are permanent going out that people should be aware of? And because people have forgotten about Trump accounts past, long time ago, 6 months, 7 months ago. And all of a sudden, wow, it gets in the news and you realize how powerful that is. Give us the rant on the list alphabetically, if you can, of all the good things in the tax bill.
I'll break it down to more the individual and business buckets of tax.
In iambic pentameter, kind of like a poem.
First, we'll dispel what the Democrat lie and attack on this bill is going to be, which is, of course, every time you cut taxes, they're going to say it's only for wealthy and corporations. Full stop lie. Every income bracket received a tax cut in this bill, including an additional bump up for the inflation of the Biden years. 2 brackets. The first year immediately felt by taxpayers. You got permanency on things like the death tax for the first time, in which we've made the tax relief. The increased exemption levels for the death tax are now permanent, and that's the theme you'll see of what we did in these tax cuts, is the permanency. In the business side, for the individuals, you also saw things like a bumped up child tax credit to now $2,200 per child. That's something Republicans have talked about for a long time, something Democrats always seek to make fully refundable, which means make it spending beyond people's tax cut, but actually just spending through the tax code. Republicans do not do that. They just make this an increase of $200 for the child tax credit. We saw on the business side things like permanent expensing for research and development, full cost recovery and bonus depreciation, and interest deductibility, the 3 main pro-growth pieces of this bill, allowing businesses, if you're going to invest in something like new equipment, a new truck for your company, you can immediately 100% deduction on that and reinvest in your business. That makes workers more productive, meaning their employers can start to pay their workers more. And that's where we see the growth in household wages coming from this bill. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that roughly $2,400 increase in family wages in the first 4 years from those provisions alone. Right there, I think is just massive. I think that's great that we were able to make that permanent. Probably the biggest lift in this bill. And then, of course, you saw the things that President Trump campaigned on, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and the new deductibility for seniors, a $6,000 deduction for seniors. So really checking the box on all of President Trump's economic tax agenda within this one bill, massively pro-growth. And again, having these provisions start immediately in 2025, great for the economy. I think we're starting to see that in these GDP numbers coming forward now, where we had great growth the last 2 quarters following passing of this tax bill.
Now, what was the third quarter and what do we know about the fourth quarter? Because it just ended. How do we feel? What was the growth in those 2 quarters?
The projections on it are very high, but we have in the third quarter, I believe we had 3.8% growth annualized in just the third quarter alone here. Meaning we're about to come over expectations for the year. We had coming in to the beginning of Trump's term still have the kind of leftover economic impact of the Biden years. That first quarter was still a rough number where the economy actually retracted, but seeing very good growth coming out post tax bill passing.
And the fourth quarter, what's the estimate there?
I think it's still being estimated. I think we've seen as high as 4.5% coming out of some of the early predictions, but too early to tell there. I think on the year for 2025, expected to come in above 2% now. And Grover, I want to highlight we had another major win coming from the One Big Beautiful Bill just last week in the international space. And that was the announcement from the Treasury Department that the U.S. will largely be exempted from the Europeans' global minimum tax. Grover, if you want to talk a little bit about what that effort from the Biden administration and the OECD countries, what exactly was the global minimum tax?
Well, today, Europe gets more money stealing from our high-tech firms with taxes aimed just at American firms than they do in earnings from taxes from all the companies that live there that they tax. So they make more money off of our businesses than their own businesses. They don't need to invent anything. They just, kind of like Vikings, right? Vikings don't build castles and Vikings don't, raise livestock. Vikings steal stuff. And the Europeans have decided to steal our stuff when it comes to American companies, particularly high-tech companies. And they wanted, in addition to that behavior, they wanted to set up a floor so that all companies in the world would have to have a certain high tax rate on corporations and on individuals they want to. Why? Because they have very high taxes. We think we have a welfare state that's dysfunctional. We do. Is our welfare state too big? Yes. Europe's is worse and encourages more people not to work and to quit work earlier. The French just had a vote that's just amazing about you're allowed to leave the workforce and get your pension, I don't know, when you're 13 or something. I mean, it's very low. It's not 65. And they don't want to work. They want to have high taxes, but they think it's cheating if the Americans have low taxes and good growth. And we want to grow with low taxes and less regulations, less expensive government. They want to compete with lower wages. We don't want to compete by having lower wages. We want high wages, big wages, huge wages, not teeny wages. And so the Europeans wanted to get us. We're doing something very stupid, self-destructive by having high tax rates. Could you guys do the same thing? And then when we have a race, we'll be more even. And the Trump administration said, heck no. The Biden administration tried to sell us out actively, say, oh, we'll do that. We'll do that. Could get Congress to support it, but that you worry what you can do with an executive order. They'd convinced the Europeans that we were going to say, we won't take our taxes down below 18, 15%. And Americans for Tax Reform has been arguing to the Trump administration, we took it down to 21. Trump took it from 35 down to 21. Highest in the world, stupidest in the world, dumber than France, not where you want to be, down to 21. Okay, pretty good, better than where we were, but not good enough. We want to get down to at least 15. That's what Trump ran on in 2016, 15. My argument at Americans for Tax Reform is make it 14.9. I mentioned this to Speaker Gingrich, and he said, nobody understands fractions like that. And I said, those are decimals, not fractions. But anyway, he said, you go to 14. 14 people get is less than 15. And he's quite right. And it's shorter. And it takes fewer digits, so it's easier on the environment. Just 14, not 14.9. So we're going to go for 14. We say, we want to go to 14. Why? Because 14 is good. It's lower than 21. It's lower than 15. But it also says to the Europeans, we're never living with your stupid 15% floor. They want to put a floor on all American taxes, not just our companies, but our individuals as well. And we need to say to the Europeans, we love you dearly, sort of. It's okay to lie in circumstances like this. But anyway, but we're going to have nice competition, but we're not going to do to ourselves the damage that Europe had. You guys in Europe used to run the world, used to be cool, okay? Not anymore. Your taxes are too high. Your regulations are too high. Nobody wants to be there anymore. And so we want to take it to 14 and compete on lower taxes, less regulations, and less spending. And with that, we are going to say good evening. See you soon. Hope you enjoy this. Please do like us and let people know that you've listened to this show and share it with others. So the Leave Us Alone show, Grover Norquist here, Mike and Isabelle, and see you soon.